right now, let's just add something or few things that we can do to modify the design of our web page. Okay. So typically we created templates using HTML files, which we created the templates directory. Okay. So basically every HTML that you need shall be stored on this templates folder because it will be located by Django itself. Now, what if we wanted to add some external CSS or JavaScript that we pre-created and so on? So how do we do that in Python Django? We call it the static files. Okay. So we need to create a static directory for Python Django to recognize those static files. So on your app, just create a new folder and then save it as static. So on this static directory, every external files that you want to incorporate in your web pages, such as images, CSS files, JavaScript files, and anything outside of your HTML shall be stored on your static file. Okay. So right now, what currently we have this output. All right, we have this output. Let's try to fix this. Let's try to have this as a data table. Okay. So to make it look somewhat more elegant than this type of display. So for this one, we'll also have a simple example of data table from Bootstrap. So we do not have to design it by ourselves. So we'll not be making some huge adjustments when it comes to coding. So suggest is for you to search data table Bootstrap so you could get the pre-created codes from Bootstrap itself. Okay. So by doing that, we'll be altering this index.html so that we can implement the data table Bootstrap on our display. Remember, this is the one that is responsible for our data display. So let's change this one. I'll be commenting this. Let's change this one to a data table. Okay. So before that, of course, we need, as I've said, we need to search. You don't need to memorize everything on Bootstrap, specifically Bootstrap, and its some features and functionality. So I have already pre-searched data table using Bootstrap. So in this example, we'll be using Bootstrap 5. So we want something like this. Okay, we want something like this on our display. So this is a zebra table, as we call it, because it has an alternate display. So there are a few things, of course, that we needed to incorporate to our program. So as you can see here, we need this JavaScript. Okay, we need this JavaScript new data table example, which is an ID of our table display. Okay, so in addition to these code, we need these following CDNs or content delivery networks for us to be able to use these functionalities. So let us try to have these data table example to our static file because this will be our own code. We can add this as an external JavaScript file. So how do we do that? So proceed on our code. On our static, just create a new file and then I'll be naming mine as script.js. Okay. Now here, I want to create that new data table and then the ID of my table. So mine, I will call it as student list. Okay. The one on the example is using example as the name of the data table, but on ours, I'll be changing that to student list. Now proceeding to the index.html. Now we need to add our JavaScript file by simply doing this. But here's the problem. This will not be recognized by our Django framework because script.js is stored in the static directory. So for us to be able to use any of our static files, first is we need to load static using the delimiter for functions. So just type load static. I suggest you put this at the top of your code. So if there are any other static files below, everything will be recognized. Now, by adding this, we need to change as well something on our URL. So we need the delimiter. We need this delimiter. Then on our URL, just type static. Then your file name or your directory itself must be quoted either single or double depending on your external quotation, of course. Okay, so this tells us to recognize that the script.js is located in the static directory. Okay, so we have done this part. Now we need to add these following CDNs. These were online documents, so we don't need to have these on our static. But if you downloaded, let's say for example, you downloaded jQuery, you need to save that in your static directory, and then you need to call it using static as well. So I'll be copying one by one the following scripts. Because we need these files for us to be able to use the functionalities of our data table. Okay, now we have our JavaScript files as stipulated by this data table. And then proceed to the HTML. Of course, we need to create our table. So let's call that. Remember, the class should be table and table striped to have the zebra display. Okay, so I'll be copying this part up until our T head. So I will not type it, of course. You can use pre-existing codes. We'll be removing 3 because we only needed 3. So again, from example, we need to change this to student list. Now for the name, we'll throw in student number. For the let's remove. For the next header, we need the full name. So we'll be displaying the full name as one, not separate like this one as first name and then last name. Then we have the actions. So what we could do, remember we have update and delete. Now, after the T head, we'll proceed with our T body. So within our T body, we'll have here the iteration of our student. So let's do the iteration, the for loop. So for student in students, sumobra tayo ng isang S. Then do not forget the end for. Okay. Then we'll have here every row. Remember, what we needed to iterate are every row that will be created on our table display. Now, on every row, we have the table data. So on the table data, here we'll throw in our Django commands for displaying contents. So I want first the student number. So I have here student, sorry for the typographical errors, student number. Then make sure it matches. So my first header is student number. So my first table data should also be the student number. Now another table data for the name. So we'll be displaying full name. So let me start with the first name. So student dot first name, and then let's have student dot last name. And then for our last table data, we'll be having the actions. So we need these following commands. So I'll just be copying this to reduce the time and effort. So let's save this one. Now, currently, we should not see, I'm not yet loading, but by default, we should not see any fancy changes yet because we don't have yet our CSS. So we had the JavaScript, we had the HTML, then we need to have the CSS. So these are all CDNs. So we can just copy these following CSS codes, CSS links. So remember to link a CSS, we need link, rel style sheet, and then for the href, we can paste here our copied link. Since there are two CSS files that we needed to incorporate, so let me just copy both. Okay, so let's save this one. Then let's see what should happen on our documents. But before that, do not forget to run our server. So py manage.py run server. So as you can see, we do not have any encountered errors. Now I think we can reload. Let's go back to our website. Now let's try to reload. Now from these output, we now have this output. So as you can see, it has a better display. It has a better design. Of course, you can explore more on using your static files and Bootstrap as well.